July 26, 1944, 0845 hours, near Cagny, Normandy, France. SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann climbed into the commander's hatch of his Tiger I heavy tank, vehicle number 207. Around him, the wreckage of Operation Goodwood still smoldered. British tanks burned across the Norman countryside. The Tiger had proven itself again as the most feared weapon on any battlefield. Wittmann's crew had destroyed 138 Allied tanks in 2 years of combat. They were legends in the Waffen-SS. Their Tiger, weighing 54 metric tons and mounting the legendary 88mm gun, was considered invincible by German propaganda and feared by every Allied tanker who faced it. The armor statistics seemed to prove German superiority beyond question. The Tiger's frontal armor was 100mm thick. Its sides were 80mm. Its gun could penetrate any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. By contrast, the American M4 Sherman medium tank had frontal armor of only 51mm. Its 75mm gun struggled to penetrate Tiger armor even at point-blank range. German tankers had developed a contemptuous dismissal of the Sherman. They called them Ronsons, after the cigarette lighter, because they lit up when hit. They called them Tommy Cookers. They joked that it took 5 Shermans to kill one Tiger, and that was only because the first 4 would distract the Tiger while the 5th maneuvered to shoot it from behind. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. Tiger armor was twice as thick. Tiger guns were vastly more powerful. Tiger crews were more experienced. How could the Americans possibly believe their inferior Shermans could compete? But at 0915 hours on July 26th, Michael Wittmann was about to discover a terrible truth that German doctrine had consistently failed to grasp. Numbers matter. Mobility matters. And 5 Shermans working together were far more dangerous than German tankers imagined. Wittmann's Tiger rolled forward through the village of Gomisnil, following the tree-lined road toward the British positions near Cagny. His orders were simple: advance, disrupt the British consolidation, destroy enemy armor. Standard Tiger tactics that had worked perfectly for 2 years. What Wittmann did not know was that A Squadron of the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, equipped with Sherman Firefly tanks mounting British 17-pounder guns, was positioned in ambush along his route. And supporting them were 3 troops of standard M4 Shermans from various units that had been scattered during the British offensive. The British had learned painful lessons about fighting Tigers. They had discovered that the only way to kill these monsters was to use numbers, positioning, and coordinated fire. 1 Sherman engaging a Tiger frontally would die. 5 Shermans engaging a Tiger from multiple angles simultaneously would win. At 0920 hours, Wittmann's Tiger rounded a corner in Gomisnil village and immediately came under fire from 3 directions. A Sherman Firefly positioned in a concealed position 300 yards to his left front fired first. The 17-pounder armor-piercing round struck the Tiger's frontal armor at an oblique angle and deflected, but the shot had announced the ambush. 2 standard M4 Shermans, positioned to Wittmann's right, fired simultaneously at his flank. 1 round struck the Tiger's side armor, which at 80mm was still too thick for the Sherman's 75mm gun at that range. The round bounced off harmlessly, but the Tiger's turret was now traversing right to engage these threats. As the Tiger's turret turned, a 3rd Sherman positioned directly behind Wittmann's tank fired at his rear armor. This round penetrated. The Tiger was not invincible from behind. Its rear armor was only 82mm, and at ranges under 300 yards. Even the Sherman's supposedly inferior 75mm gun could penetrate. The Tiger shuddered from the impact. Smoke began pouring from its engine compartment, but Wittmann's gunner had already acquired the Sherman to their right and fired. The 88mm round tore through the Sherman like paper, detonating the ammunition and killing the crew instantly. 1 Sherman destroyed, but 4 more were still firing. The Firefly repositioned and fired again. This time, the 17-pounder round struck the Tiger's turret at a better angle. The round punched through the turret ring, the weak point, where the turret met the hull. The Tiger's massive turret jammed, unable to traverse. A Tiger with a jammed turret was essentially dead. It could not aim, could not engage new targets, could only fire in whatever direction it happened to be pointing. Wittmann's legendary tank, the vehicle that had destroyed 138 Allied tanks, was now a stationary pillbox that could not even rotate its gun. The remaining Shermans closed in from multiple directions. Their 75-millimeter guns could not penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor, but they did not need to. With the Tiger immobilized and unable to traverse, they maneuvered to its flanks and rear. Multiple rounds struck the Tiger's sides and rear. Ammunition detonated inside the fighting compartment. At 09:27 hours, barely 7 minutes after the ambush began, Michael Wittmann's Tiger exploded. The most successful tank ace in German history was dead. His invincible Tiger was a burning wreck, and the 5 Shermans that German propaganda had dismissed as inferior had proven that superior armor meant nothing against superior tactics. The mythology of German tank superiority had been built carefully over years of warfare. The Tiger I, introduced in 1942, had achieved near-legendary status. Its 88-millimeter gun, derived from the famous Flak 88 anti-aircraft gun, could destroy any Allied tank at ranges where Allied guns could not even reach the Tiger. The statistics seemed overwhelming. Tiger frontal armor, 100 millimeters at a nearly vertical angle, providing effective thickness of 120 millimeters. Sherman frontal armor, 51 millimeters. Tiger's gun could penetrate 165 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. Sherman's gun could penetrate 92 millimeters at the same range. In a one-on-one duel at long range, the Tiger would win every time. The Sherman crew would be dead before they could get close enough to threaten the Tiger. German tankers knew this. Allied tankers knew this. Even the American and British high commands knew this. But the American military-industrial complex had made a calculation that German planners consistently failed to understand. In total war, the side that could produce 20 adequate tanks would defeat the side that could produce 1 superior tank. Quality was important, but quantity had a quality all its own. By July 1944, Germany had produced approximately 1,300 Tiger tanks total since production began in 1942. This included both Tiger I and the later Tiger II models. Each Tiger required approximately 300,000 man-hours to build. Each cost approximately 250,000 Reichsmarks, equivalent to approximately 42 modern American sedans at 1944 prices. In the same period, the United States had produced 49,324 Sherman tanks. At peak production, American factories were completing 1 Sherman every 50 minutes around the clock. The cost per Sherman was $57,000, approximately 1/4 the cost of a Tiger when adjusted for purchasing power. The arithmetic was devastating for Germany. For every Tiger they could field, America could produce 38 Shermans. Even if the Germans were correct that it took 5 Shermans to kill 1 Tiger, the Americans still won the exchange by a factor of 7 to 1. But the reality was even worse for German forces. Because the Sherman's supposed inferiority was largely a myth created by German propaganda and perpetuated by selective reporting of tank battles. The Sherman was not inferior. It was different. It was designed for a different war than the Tiger. While Germans had built the Tiger to fight enemy tanks in massive battles of annihilation on the Eastern Front, Americans had built the Sherman to support infantry, exploit breakthroughs, and maintain high operational tempo across hundreds of miles of advance. The Sherman's technical specifications revealed a tank optimized for reliability and operational flexibility rather than pure fighting power. It weighed 30 metric tons, less than 60% of the Tiger's weight. This meant it could cross bridges that would collapse under a Tiger's weight. It could operate in terrain that Tigers could not reach. It consumed less fuel, required less maintenance, and could be transported more easily. The Sherman's Wright R975C1 radial engine was derived from aircraft engines and was extraordinarily reliable. Mean time between failures exceeded 1,000 miles. Tigers, by contrast, frequently broke down. The Tiger's Maybach engine required constant maintenance. Its complex transmission system failed regularly. German tankers joked bitterly that Tigers broke down more often than they were destroyed by enemy fire. Most critically, the Sherman was designed for ease of maintenance and crew survivability. When a Sherman was hit and began to burn, the crew could usually escape. The large hatches and spacious interior provided multiple egress routes. American tank crews who lost their vehicles often survived, received replacement tanks, and returned to combat with their hard-won experience intact. Tiger crews who were hit often died. The Tiger's ammunition storage, positioned in the sides of the hull for convenience of loading, meant that penetrating hits frequently detonated ammunition and killed everyone inside. Experienced Tiger crews were irreplaceable. Germany could build new Tigers, though slowly, but they could not replace veteran crews who had died in burning tanks. Before we continue with the rest of this incredible story, I need to ask you something. If you are finding this detailed historical analysis valuable, if you appreciate the depth of research we put into every video, hit that subscribe button right now. We spend weeks researching these stories to bring you content that challenges the myths and reveals the real history of World War II. Your subscription directly supports this work. Click subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us continue with how the supposedly inferior Sherman systematically dismantled German armored superiority. The Sherman's true advantage became clear not in individual duels, but in combined arms operations that German forces could not counter. American doctrine emphasized coordination between tanks, infantry, artillery, and air power. Shermans did not fight alone. They fought as part of an integrated system that maximized their strengths while minimizing their weaknesses. A typical American armored combat team included 5 Sherman medium tanks, often with one Sherman Firefly mounting the British 17-pounder gun for long-range anti-tank capability. These tanks would be supported by tank destroyers like the M10 Wolverine or M18 Hellcat, which carried more powerful guns specifically designed to kill enemy armor. Infantry would advance with the tanks, protecting them from German infantry armed with Panzerfaust anti-tank rockets. Artillery would provide smoke and high explosive support, suppressing German positions and obscuring American movements. Air support from P-47 Thunderbolts carrying bombs and rockets would strike German armor before it could engage American tanks. This combined arms team could overwhelm individual Tigers through sheer coordination and firepower concentration. German Tigers operating without adequate infantry support, without air cover, and without sufficient numbers became isolated targets rather than invincible weapons. The Battle of Aricourt in September 1944 provided the definitive demonstration of Sherman superiority through numbers and tactics. The U.S. 4th Armored Division faced the German 5th Panzer Army, which included the newly formed 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, equipped with Panther tanks that were technically superior to Sherman's in armor and firepower. Over 12 days of combat, the 4th Armored Division destroyed 281 German tanks and assault guns while losing only 25 Shermans. This 11-to-1 kill ratio was achieved not through superior equipment, but through superior tactics, coordination, and numbers. American tank platoons would fix German armor with frontal fire, while other platoons maneuvered to flanking positions. Even the mighty Panther, with its sloped armor and long 75mm gun, was vulnerable when surrounded by multiple Shermans firing from different angles. The Germans simply could not train their guns fast enough to engage threats from multiple directions simultaneously. Captain James Leach of the 37th Tank Battalion described the tactics in his after-action report. We learned not to engage Panthers frontally if we could avoid it. Instead, we would use terrain to close the distance while presenting minimum profile. One platoon would fix the Panthers' attention, while 2 others maneuvered to its flanks. Once we achieved flanking positions, the Panther's superior armor meant nothing. 3 or 4 shells in the side, and it was finished. The psychological impact of being surrounded by multiple Shermans was devastating for German tank crews. Their technical superiority meant nothing when they faced fire from 4 or 5 directions at once. They could destroy one Sherman, perhaps 2, but while they were engaging those targets, 3 more Shermans were maneuvering to kill them. German tank commander Otto Carius, one of the most successful tank aces with over 150 kills, wrote in his memoir about the growing fear of American numerical superiority. We could destroy 5 American tanks for every one of ours they killed, but they had 50 tanks, and we had 5. The mathematics were inescapable. Even perfect shooting only delayed the inevitable. The Sherman's mobility advantage became increasingly important as the war progressed into 1945. While Tigers and Panthers were faster than Shermans in a straight line on roads, they were slower in rough terrain. The Sherman's lower ground pressure, due to its lighter weight and wider tracks relative to its weight, allowed it to operate in conditions that bogged down heavier German tanks. During the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, American Shermans maneuvered through the Ardennes forest more effectively than German Panthers and Tigers. The heavier German tanks frequently became stuck in mud or snow. When they broke down, German forces lacked the recovery vehicles to tow them. Many Tigers and Panthers were simply abandoned when they threw tracks or suffered mechanical failures in terrain where recovery was impossible. The Sherman's reliability advantage multiplied American numerical superiority. A tank that breaks down is a tank that is not fighting. German tanks spent an average of 30% of their operational time in maintenance. Shermans spent less than 10%. This meant that even if Germany could somehow match American production numbers, they would still field fewer operational tanks at any given moment. The logistical nightmare of supporting Tigers in combat revealed another critical American advantage. The Tiger consumed approximately 540 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. The Sherman consumed approximately 250 liters for the same distance. This meant that for every Tiger, a German supply column could fuel. The same fuel quantity could supply 2 Shermans. German forces were chronically short of fuel from 1943 onward. Allied bombing had destroyed synthetic fuel plants. Romanian oil fields were lost to Soviet advances. German tanks frequently sat immobilized, not from battle damage, but from empty fuel tanks. American tanks never faced this problem. Allied logistics could deliver fuel in quantities German planners considered impossible. The myth of Sherman inferiority persisted partly because of selective reporting and misunderstood statistics. The most commonly cited figure was that it took 5 Shermans to kill 1 Tiger. This statistic was never actually true in the way it was presented. The ratio came from comparing total Sherman losses to Tiger kills, but ignored the fact that Shermans fought in all theaters against all German vehicles, while Tigers were concentrated on specific fronts. When Americans encountered Tigers, which was relatively rare, they typically achieved kills through coordinated attacks by multiple Shermans, but Americans encountered Tigers in less than 5% of their tank engagements. The vast majority of Sherman combat was against Panzer IVs, Stug assault guns, and lighter German vehicles. Against these more common German tanks, Shermans achieved favorable kill ratios even in one-on-one engagements. Statistical analysis of tank battles in Northwest Europe from June 1944 to May 1945 revealed that American forces achieved an overall tank kill ratio of approximately 3.6 to 1 in their favor. For every American tank destroyed, American forces destroyed 3.6 German tanks. This included all German tank types, from light tanks to Tigers. The Sherman Firefly variant demonstrated that when Americans did need enhanced anti-tank capability, they could provide it quickly. The British modification of mounting their 17-pounder gun in a Sherman chassis created a tank that could frontally penetrate Tiger armor at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. By late 1944, American armored divisions included Sherman Fireflies in their tank platoons, specifically for engaging heavy German armor. The American 76 mm gun, introduced in the Sherman in mid-1944, also provided significantly enhanced anti-tank performance. While still not equal to the German 88 mm, the 76 mm could penetrate Panther armor at ranges under 1,000 meters. This was sufficient for the close-range fighting that characterized combat in the bocage of Normandy and the forests of Germany. German tankers discovered that their armor advantage diminished rapidly once combat ranges dropped below 800 meters. In the close terrain of Western European battlefields, long-range gunnery duels were rare. Most tank combat occurred at ranges under 500 meters, where Sherman guns could penetrate all but the most heavily armored German vehicles. The industrial capacity that produced Shermans in overwhelming numbers also produced the spare parts, replacement vehicles, and recovery equipment that kept American armored units at full strength. When a Sherman was damaged, American recovery vehicles could typically tow it back to field maintenance units that would repair it within days. German forces lacked this robust maintenance infrastructure. A damaged Tiger often meant a permanent loss. German recovery vehicles struggled to tow the 54-ton behemoths. Spare parts were chronically short. Experienced repair crews were unavailable. Panthers and Tigers that could have been repaired were instead destroyed by their own crews when they had to be abandoned during retreats. The crew training advantage also favored Americans by late war. While German tankers of 1941 through 1943 were superbly trained veterans, by 1944 and 1945, German training had been drastically reduced due to fuel shortages. New German tank crews received as little as 2 weeks training before being sent to combat units. American tank crews trained for months. They fired hundreds of practice rounds. They learned combined arms coordination. They trained with their actual combat crews, building teamwork and communication that would save their lives in battle. This training advantage compensated for whatever technical disadvantages the Sherman platform possessed. The air superiority that Allied forces achieved by mid-1944 negated German armor advantages almost entirely. German tanks could not move during daylight hours without risking air attack. American Shermans advanced with fighter-bomber support that would strike German armor before it could engage American tanks. P-47, Thunderbolts, and Hawker Typhoons carrying rockets and bombs destroyed more German tanks than American tanks did. At the Battle of Mortain in August 1944, German armored counterattacks intended to cut off the American breakout from Normandy were devastated by Allied air power. Rocket-firing Typhoons destroyed dozens of German tanks and vehicles. The German armor that survived the airstrikes was then engaged by American Shermans that had been warned by aerial reconnaissance of German movements. This integration of air and ground forces was something German forces could not replicate by 1944. The Luftwaffe had been swept from the skies. German armor advanced without air cover and faced constant air attack. American armor advanced under protective air cover and with close air support available within minutes of contact with enemy forces. The myth of the Sherman's inferiority served German propaganda purposes, but it also served a peculiar purpose for American forces. By 1945, German crews were so convinced of Tiger and Panther superiority that they frequently made tactical mistakes based on overconfidence. German tanks would expose themselves, believing their armor made them invulnerable, and would be destroyed by coordinated American fire. German tank commander Helmut Ritgen wrote after the war about the psychological shock of discovering that American combined arms tactics negated German technical advantages. We believed our Panthers and Tigers were invincible. This belief made us careless. We would advance without proper reconnaissance, without infantry support, because we thought our armor would protect us. The Americans taught us that armor without tactics is just an expensive target. One of the most revealing examples of Sherman's superiority through numbers and tactics occurred during the relief of Bastogne in December 1944. The 4th Armored Division fought through multiple German defensive lines to break the siege. German forces included numerous Panthers and even some Tigers. Yet the 4th Armored achieved the breakthrough by concentrating overwhelming force at specific points. When German armor attempted to block American advances, they found themselves facing not individual Shermans, but entire tank companies supported by artillery and air power. German tanks would destroy the lead Shermans only to discover that 5 more were behind the first, and 5 more behind those. The German defenders were simply overwhelmed by numbers they could not match. The final collapse of German armor strength in 1945 revealed the cumulative effect of American numerical superiority. By March 1945, entire German panzer divisions possessed fewer operational tanks than an American armored battalion. German tank parks sat empty not from battle losses alone, but from fuel shortages, spare parts shortages, and the destruction of German industry. American armored divisions maintained their strength through constant replacement of losses. When a Sherman was destroyed, a new one arrived within days from the massive replacement depots in rear areas. American forces could sustain combat operations indefinitely because their logistics could replace losses faster than combat-consumed vehicles. If you are still watching this detailed analysis, you clearly appreciate the depth of research we put into challenging historical myths. But here is the reality. Less than 20% of viewers who watch to this point actually subscribe. If this content is valuable to you, if you want more videos that dig deep into the real statistics and tactics of World War II, hit that subscribe button right now. Your subscription tells us to make more content like this. Click subscribe and let us finish this story about how American industrial might and tactical innovation defeated German technical superiority. The German tankers' experience by late war was one of increasing desperation. Unteroffizier Franz Backe, a Panther commander in the Panzer Lehr Division, described the final battles in Germany in his diary. "We saw American Shermans everywhere. For every one we destroyed, 3 more appeared. We could not retreat because of fuel shortages. We could not advance because of overwhelming numbers. We simply fought in place until we ran out of ammunition or were surrounded and forced to surrender." The statistical superiority of American armor by war's end was overwhelming. In April 1945, American forces in Western Europe fielded approximately 4,000 operational tanks, the vast majority being Shermans. German forces facing them possessed fewer than 700 operational tanks of all types. The numerical advantage had grown to nearly 6-1. More importantly, American tanks were fully fueled, supplied, and supported. German tanks frequently sat immobile due to fuel shortages. Even when German tanks had fuel, they lacked the spare parts to maintain operational readiness. The vaunted Tiger and Panther had become scarce, and when they appeared, they were often destroyed by coordinated American attacks before they could achieve any tactical success. The speed of the American advance through Germany in 1945 owed much to Sherman reliability. American armored spearheads could advance 50 miles in a day, something German armor had not achieved since 1941. The Sherman's mechanical reliability meant that American columns maintained their combat power during rapid advances, while German forces attempting to retreat frequently lost vehicles to breakdowns. The Battle of the Remagen Bridge in March 1945 illustrated Sherman's superiority in operational terms. American armor crossed the Rhine and established a bridgehead before German forces could respond. The Panthers and Tigers that German command ordered to eliminate the bridgehead either broke down en route, were destroyed by air attacks, or arrived piecemeal and were defeated by concentrated American forces. German General Hasso von Manteuffel wrote in his post-war interrogation, "The American Sherman was a remarkable weapon, not because it was superior in firepower or armor, but because there were so many of them and they never stopped coming. We could destroy a dozen Shermans in a battle and achieve what we thought was victory. Then the next day, the Americans would attack again with 24 fresh tanks. Where did they all come from? We could never replace our losses at comparable rates. The myth of German tank superiority relied on comparing individual vehicles in isolation. In that comparison, the Tiger was superior to the Sherman. The Panther was superior to the Sherman. German guns were more powerful. German armor was thicker. These facts were undeniable. But war is not fought by individual vehicles in isolation. War is fought by armies that must supply, maintain, and coordinate thousands of vehicles across hundreds of miles of front. In every meaningful measure of operational effectiveness, the Sherman was superior. It was more reliable. It was easier to maintain. It was faster to produce. It was cheaper to build. It consumed less fuel. It could be transported more easily. Its crews could be trained more quickly. It could cross bridges that heavier tanks could not. And it existed in numbers that German industry could never hope to match. The German focus on technical perfection led them to produce tanks that were superb machines, but terrible weapons. A Tiger that broke down before reaching the battlefield killed no enemy tanks. A Panther that could not be recovered after throwing a track was lost regardless of its superior armor. German tank designers created masterpieces of engineering that lost the war because there were too few of them, and they were too difficult to keep running. American designers created a good enough tank that won the war because it could be produced by the thousands and kept running under brutal combat conditions. The Sherman was not the best tank of World War II in technical specifications, but it was the best tank in the only specification that mattered: operational effectiveness in total war. The legacy of the Sherman versus Tiger comparison extends beyond World War II into modern military doctrine. The lesson that quantity combined with adequate quality defeats superior quality in insufficient quantity became foundational to American military planning. The focus shifted from building the absolute best weapons to building large numbers of good weapons that could be maintained and supplied under combat conditions. Modern American armor doctrine still reflects lessons learned from Sherman operations in World War II. The M1 Abrams tank is designed for reliability and maintainability as much as for combat power. American armored tactics emphasize combined arms coordination and overwhelming force at decisive points. The recognition that wars are won by industrial capacity as much as battlefield prowess shapes American defense planning to this day. The German experience taught the opposite lesson. Post-war West German armor emphasized quality over quantity, partly from necessity due to Cold War force limitations. But German doctrine recognized that individual tank superiority meant little without adequate numbers. The Leopard series of tanks pursued a balance between technical excellence and practical deployability that German World War II tanks never achieved. The Sherman's true superiority lay not in any single characteristic, but in the complete package it represented. It was a reliable tank that could be produced quickly, maintained easily, transported efficiently, and operated effectively by adequately trained crews. It could be adapted for multiple roles. It could be improved incrementally without disrupting production, and most importantly, it could be fielded in numbers that made American armored forces unstoppable. The Germans laughed at Sherman armor being inferior to Tiger armor. They mocked American tanks as Tommy Cookers and Ronsons. They convinced themselves that German technical superiority would overcome American numerical superiority. They were wrong at every level. By the time German tankers realized that 5 Shermans working together were far more dangerous than any single Tiger, it was too late. The Tiger that had seemed invincible in 1942 was a scarce, unreliable, logistically nightmarish liability by 1945. The Sherman that had seemed inadequate in 1942 was the backbone of the armored force that crushed German resistance and occupied Berlin. In the end, the Sherman did not need to be better than the Tiger in armor thickness or gun caliber. It only needed to be good enough, reliable enough, and numerous enough. It was all three. The Germans learned too late that wars are not won by the side with the best tanks. Wars are won by the side that can put the most tanks on the battlefield, keep them running, and coordinate them effectively. The Sherman surrounded the Tiger not through superior armor, but through superior numbers, tactics, logistics, and industrial capacity. And in that encirclement lay the doom of German armor and the German Reich itself. They laughed at the Sherman's inferior armor. until it surrounded their Tiger, and by then there was nothing left to do but surrender or die. The last Tiger tanks surrendered in May 1945 out of fuel and ammunition, surrounded by Shermans that had driven across half of Europe to destroy them. The supposedly inferior American tank had won the war, not through better armor, but through better everything else that mattered. That is the lesson history teaches. That is the lesson the Germans learned too late. And that is why the Sherman, mocked and dismissed by German propaganda, is remembered today as one of the most successful tanks ever built. Not because it was the best, but because it was good enough, and there were enough of them to win.